Welcome. People are joining. People are joining. Yeah, let's put that up here. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome. Come on in. Join us. Think up your epoxy questions as you're joining. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. TGIF. Hey guys, glad to see so many people joining in. Happy day, how you doing? Welcome. Hey, how you doing guys?
Join us.
Hey, Sailing Zephyr, JL Innovations, how you guys doing? Nat and James. Hello. Thanks to everybody for joining. Welcome, my name is Kristen. I work for TotalBoat, obviously. And we're here in the TotalBoat lab today doing our live. And yesterday we asked people in our stories to put some Q&As or the questions. We have the A's. You leave the Q's, we'll give you the A's today for the live on epoxy resin and any questions you have that we might be able to help you with. So there was a good list that you guys gave us for our epoxy Q&A. So we'll start that now. Thanks to everybody for joining. Hello. Hello, Eric. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Kristen with TotalBoat. Welcome. Epoxy Q&A. Here we go. Okay. One of the first things that everybody wants to know about epoxy resin is, with so many varieties available, which one do you use for what? So we're going to talk about that and go over our line of epoxies, most of them. And thanks for joining. So happy Friday. Let's jump in. Okay. We're going to start over here with Maker Epoxy. We have a couple one-to-one epoxies. Epoxies all have a resin and a hardener, and it's epoxy resin because there is also a resin called polyester resin, and we're not going to talk about that today. But that's a boat building resin, a fabricating resin. And these are boat building resins, and they're also art resins and woodworking resins. You can do all the things with a lot of these epoxies. So we'll break it down for you. We'll keep it simple. We'll go quick. So take notes, and we're going to save this for you so you can replay it. Maker Epoxy, one of our one-to-one formulas. That means you're going to use the same amount of the resin as you do the hardener. This is our epoxy line that we do with Jess Crow. It's great with color. So equal parts resin and hardener. You mix them together, and it dries nice and clear. It has a little bit of UV in it, so it's really good for outside things. And there's a fan over there we can turn off. We have our laser fan just started, so all the way on the bottom right, Megan. Have Megan here helping me. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining. All right. Oh, Paul Jackman in the house. Paul, hello. Okay, so Maker Epoxy. This was our first one-to-one resin, okay? This is suitable for tabletops. It's suitable for making waves. It's suitable for coating things. You can do a little bit of casting with it because it's a little bit of a thinner viscosity, and it has a little bit of UV inhibitors in there, which means that it's better at staying nice and clear and not yellowing from the sun. All epoxies over time will, and I mean time like several years, probably start to get a little bit yellow. And we'll talk about yellowing as we go on too. You can tint Maker Epoxy with all sorts of pigments. Eric is asking a bunch of questions about what kind of pigments. You can use acrylic paints, although we prefer that you use our TotalBoat pigments or mix-all pigments, and a lot of you are familiar with that kind of stuff. But Maker Epoxy really loves working with color. It's just really vibrant, and when you add color to it, it looks great. You could fill knots with it. You can coat artwork with it, like I said, but it's really what it's not good at is bonding. So we'll talk about bonding and gluing with epoxy. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hi, Suze. All right. TotalBoat, Maker Epoxy with Jess Crow, one-to-one. The other one-to-one epoxy that we have is our tabletop epoxy. Also, 1 part resin to 1 part hardener. Each of these just have one hardener. Some of our other epoxy lines have several different hardener speeds, and that controls how fast you have with your epoxy resin. Hey, Lindsay, we have Lindsay Woodbrain on here from last week. Thanks, Linz, for doing our live last week. Now look what you did. You made me do it this week. And Lighthouse Boston, Hopefully he's next week. And Scott, look, I could just spend the whole live saying hi to people, but I won't. Okay, back to tabletop epoxy. Okay, this is the second one-to-one formula. It's the only other one. It's for bar tops. It's for filling knots if you want to. It's for clear coating. You could do small castings. Still not your gluing epoxy, still not your boat building epoxy, but you can pretty much do everything else. Brittany, hello. Yes, no structural integrity. If you watched last week's live, and hopefully you had a lot of drinks when Linz was talking about structural integrity, this is not your structural epoxy. However, it's awesome, it's clear, it's great at waves. I have an example of some waves here, made with tabletop. This is sort of the wave technique that has been popular for several years. I think that Lucas was telling me from Lighthouse Boston, he's in our chat now, he even uses tabletop to fill knots, and he certainly coats and does rivers with the tabletop as well. It just means you can't pour as deep as one of our actual deep pour resins, and we'll get to that soon. So this was actually made by Grace Bell Art. If you don't follow her, go on over and check her page out. She has mastered this wave technique, as has Jess Crow, and that's the Maker Epoxy is Jess's line. I just happen to have this beautiful surfboard from the tabletop line, so that's what I was doing. And Nat from Sailing Zephyr, she wants a top tip. So we're gonna do some top tips with Nat coming up soon, but I would say a top tip for tabletop, and really for any epoxy, is to get all of your colors, all of your pigments, everything that you're gonna do with your epoxy resin project laid out before you even start mixing, okay? That's a top tip. Nat has more. She made waves all over the countertop inside of their sailboat. And there's a video on our website about that. So thanks to Grace Bell, and thanks to Top Tip Nat, and James as well. So that's tabletop. So since we've been talking about gluing and epoxies for bonding, and we've even mentioned the word boat, which is one of our favorite words, we'll talk about our other epoxy. This is high performance epoxy. High performance epoxy is not one-to-one like tabletop was. High performance is 2-to-1, which means you're going to use twice as much resin as you are hardener. So when you get your kit, and this is actually the wrong epoxy, but this is the resin for tabletop, it will look like this though. You'll have twice as much resin as you do hardener, okay? So you're gonna mix them at a 2-to-1 ratio. Every TotalBoat product says the ratio of your epoxy right on the front, so you can't mess it up, okay? So back to high performance epoxy. It's my favorite epoxy, if I'm gonna be honest. It does every single thing. You could build a boat, you can bond with it, you can do fiberglass, you could do waves, you could do a tabletop, you can fill knots, you could even, if you ask April Wilkerson, make a river table. You have to do very shallow 1/8" pours at a time. But this is also, like I said, it's the boat building epoxy. When you play with the hardener speeds of epoxy resin, you mess around with how much time you have in stirring. And also, as far as our epoxy is concerned, you mess around with the clarity, okay? This comes in slow, in medium, and in fast. Fast is got the most amber tint to it. And fast, as soon as you start mixing, you have about 5 to 10 minutes before it's completely cured. So you have to mix it and get it out of the cup as soon as possible. You can mess around and find out. If you do, this one's gonna make nice little smoke, maybe some flames. Don't mess around with fast hardener unless you're experienced with epoxy and you're ready to get going as soon as you've mixed it. Another thing that high performance is really great at in slow, medium, or in fast hardener speed is sealing. So if you're going to do a tabletop pour, if you're going to do a river table, if you're gonna do anything with a piece of wood or something that has any air or gases inside of it, you're really going to want to seal first. Plywood is a great example of something that you want to seal. A lot of people like doing inlays. You can cut plywood out on your laser, you can cut it on your you can put it on your CNC, but as soon as you start to put epoxy in it, it's going to start to let the bubbles out of the wood, right? I'm so distracted by these crazy comments these people are having, and I'm trying to just focus up. Okay. So you don't what was I saying? Megan's here to keep me on track. So the hardener speeds. So you want to seal with either one of these, and all sealing would really mean is to take a thin layer and you could brush it on. You just want it to be thin, and it'll cure quickly. But what'll happen is that that will form a nice coating over anything that might gas out. And doing 2 seal coats isn't even a bad idea. You can use a chip brush. You can get it in there, just get it in all the bubbles, let it cure. This stuff sets up in about an hour. Okay, so if you're working, we like every epoxy working workshop, and actually the temperature of your actual epoxy resin and of your substrate, whatever your subject's on. If you leave your board in the back of your car in Rhode Island here overnight, you're going to have a board that's very cold when you pull it in your shop. So even if your epoxy's warm and your shop is a lovely temperature, if that wood is cold, you're going to have bubbles and you're going to have a lot of problems with your epoxy. Okay? Thanks for joining, you guys. I appreciate it. Yes. So a clean space is best. Time on your side, and getting all of your stuff laid out first. Just the more prepared you are, the better. Okay, so sealing with high performance is a great idea, especially if you're going to use a deep pour epoxy. You can also seal with a thin coat of tabletop epoxy, and maker epoxy. And penetrating, yeah. So that's a good way to skip to penetrating. And we can circle back and you can ask specific epoxy questions at the end, but this seemed like a good way to start. Okay, slow, medium, fast, high performance. That's a 2-to-1. Another 2-to-1 in our line is penetrating epoxy. Penetrating epoxy is basically a thinned epoxy, so that it, when you put it on, is perfect for sealing. It's a perfect first coat in boat building and in any end grain. If you have a beautiful chair that you've built and you're going to go put it in your yard, put some penetrating epoxy or high performance or something on the bottom of the feet of your chair that are going to be sitting in the ground and the mud and the rain and stuff. And that'll help it not soak the water up through that grain. Penetrating epoxy as a thinned epoxy is going to take a little longer to cure. So it seeps in really deep into the wood. It goes into all the grains. And so as such, it takes a little longer to cure. But once you've got it penetrated, then I think, I know that Lucas from Lighthouse Boston was saying he also will use penetrating epoxy first before. And I cannot stress enough how you want to clean your wood and you want to seal your wood before you go to anything where you think you might be in a final step, because wood has air and it gasses out, okay? Also great for wooden surfboards, yes. And if you're looking for wooden surfboard techniques, you have to go follow No Bad Tides and Woodbrain, because they're doing a couple Jarvis boards with our high performance epoxy and with some penetrating too. And they just put lights inside of one. It's like phew, crazy, so cool. Way to go. Okay, next. We'll talk about some of the thicker epoxies. The first one is thick set. We're talking about mix ratios. This, like this says here, is a 3-to-1 right there, okay? So 3 parts of the resin to 1 part of the hardener. Thick set you can pour in 1/2-inch increments, and if you have a small casting, you could do a little bit more. But if you're new to epoxy, and even if you're not, and if you just don't want to screw up a project, just err on the side of being shallow and going thinner and not pouring too much in. Epoxy, in turning to basically the plastic that it becomes, creates an exothermic reaction. That's a heat, and that cures it into basically a plastic. If you put too much hardener, if you have your epoxy too hot, if you use too much heat gun, if you have too much epoxy in a cup and it's sitting there, it will have what's called a runaway exothermic reaction. And that means that it's gotten too hot and that reaction is starting to get away from itself, and that's when it starts to smoke and it starts to melt plastic cups. And you want to put that epoxy outside on a piece of cement or pavement or something and let that chill out, and don't get near that. When epoxy is smoking, that's when you want to walk away and make sure that it's somewhere that won't be dangerous to anybody, but you don't want to inhale smoking epoxy, okay? All of our epoxies that you see here that we're talking about are low VOC, and you don't need to use respirators or anything if you're inside your shop and it's well ventilated. If you're in a tiny little living room area, if you're in the corner of your basement, if you have a tiny little garage shop, if you're sensitive to smells and odors, yes, wear PPE, okay? And yeah, just I would just be mellow and start in small steps, okay? So thick set, the 3-to-1, smaller increments. This will cure up anytime depending on how much you pour it in. This isn't going to get hard until about 12 hours after you pour it, and then it's going to start to thicken. It's called gelling, and then after that it cures into the plastic form. But this is a lot slower. So you'll find too, if you're using pigments and stuff, as epoxy cures, it's moving. And if you put like a top-down camera on it, it's wild because there's a ton of movement in there. You almost can't control it. So if you are using a thick set or a Fathom, which is right here, our even deeper epoxy, you want to swirl that epoxy color right as it's at that like thick pudding consistency. Pudding is not something we use when we discuss epoxy, but I just did, so there you go. Don't eat the epoxy, don't drink the epoxy, do not smoke the epoxy. These questions, what is happening? Let's see, Friday. Okay, hi Ian. All right, what else we got? We have all our friends, so many friends are here. Hi guys, okay. Thick set, that was thick set. That was the 3-to-1, and that we were really saying that that's a 1/2-inch pour. Its big sister is Fathom. Thick set Fathom, we're back to being a 2-to-1, okay? 2-to-1 ratio. Thick set has a minimum pour depth. So this is not a bonding epoxy. This is not a boat building epoxy. This is an epoxy for pouring in a thick amount, and that thick amount forces that exothermic reaction, and then it will cure. And so you want to pour this at least 2 inches, 1 to 2 inches, okay? And in some of the larger ones, you can pour it a little thicker as well. We have a couple of our ambassadors that do some really clever things when we talk about temperature of your shop and temperature of epoxy. Blake from BM Sculptures, he puts epoxy in a freezer. That slows it down. That makes everything colder, and that allows him to pour a lot deeper and to push the epoxy deeper than you could if you weren't playing around with the temperature. Similarly, if it's cold and you've seen us at Maker Camp or at Workbench Con, what you need to do is we use seed mats, and you get that epoxy a little bit warm, and so that way that takes care of bubbles. Bubbles are formed by having a cold epoxy or a cold substrate, like I said, so that it makes it a little more easy to pour and measure, and it just helps everything go better together as well. So you want that stuff again in the 70s, okay? So thick set Fathom, 1 to 2 inches, maybe even more. Heating mats, seed heating mats, Amazon.com. It's like, what, $4 for an Amazon seed mat, I think they're called. You would start your seeds on that. Okay. Thick set and Fathom, you can mix with one of these things. Don't mix your other epoxies with these. A lot of people have these in their shops. This is only good for a thin viscosity resin, okay? That means the tabletop, even high performance. If you use this on a resin that's gonna cure within your hour, you've just added a ton of bubbles to your epoxy. So these are awesome if you're mixing paints, if you're catalyzing something, but if you are mixing one of the thicker, the tabletop, the Maker Epoxy, high performance, don't use this. Use a stir stick, and you're gonna stir slowly, and you're gonna scrape the sides. Okay, another epoxy of ours, you've seen Jason Hibbs, a bunch of guys love this. I know that Jackman's use this on boats. Thixo, this is basically our high performance epoxy here, and it is, oh, I just broke our boat. It is thickened, okay? And it's got a special tip, and so it's actually got 2 parts inside of here, the resin and the hardener, and it mixes in the tip and comes out of this tip, okay? This is a tip that's been used. If you have this, we have a special gun that has a little higher thrust ratio that helps us get out, because this too can get cold and thicker, and then it's harder to move through this tip. And so this too likes to be a little warm. And we also put this on seed mats at Maker Camp to warm it up. We're lowering the viscosity, we're making it easier to get out of the tip. See that? Okay, now between uses, you might ask, what do? You leave the tip on, you let this whole thing cure. This is totally cured right now. And then when you're ready to use it again, you take this off. We'll show you the two tips there. You can see the resin and the hardener side. One is twice as thick as the other because it's 2-to-1. And then you put your new tip on and you go. If you're out of tips, you could squirt that onto a piece of wood and mix it around with a popsicle stick, and you can just mix it yourself. Like all epoxies, like all paints, like everything you're measuring, anything that's being dispensed out of a special tip, you're gonna have to prime that thing every time that it's been out of use, basically. If you walk away from it for more than a couple hours and it doesn't distribute evenly out of either our epoxy pumps or our metering pump or this tip, then you need to prime it, okay? So that means you're gonna discard the first little bit of any of that we're just talking about. Okay, hi, welcome, thanks for joining our live. We're here at TotalBoat, headquarters in Rhode Island. When you order Thixo, it comes with 2 tips, but you can also order another 12-pack. When you order extra tips, that's 12 tips at a time. Thixo also has different formulas. We love the Fast Cure. That's about a 4-hour set time on Thixo Fast. It comes in Thixo regular, and then we have one that's called low viscosity that you could use. They're all dispensed this way, and the low viscosity is just thinner, and so that will reach down into more cracks or holes or voids. All right, did we do all the epoxies? We did, I think so.
4-minute UV.
4-minute, okay, another one. Sorry, UV. This one, UV resin comes, this is one that's a single part. There's not a resin and a hardener, it's just the resin. And we give you a flashlight. Now I'm gonna give you a tip about our flashlight. It's not very good. Don't use our flashlight and then tell us it's not very good. We're just trying to get you started. Get yourself a really good UV flashlight or the sun. It works with the sun. And this is great for tiny knots. This is great for like a really big hole or void in a piece of wood. And you can just put this all the way down in there, get your flashlight, cure it, and then you can fill that with epoxy. So this can solve a lot of problems. You could also do a whole pour and find a couple little pinholes and fill it with this and be done a lot faster than having to do a whole other pour. UV resin, clear, you can tint it. You're gonna put it in a little cup and mix it around with some alcohol inks and tint it. If you're coming to Workbench Con, we're gonna do a whole project with UV resin and a surprise new product of ours coming out. Secret, top secret. You gotta be at Workbench Con to get first dibs, and we're gonna give everybody at Workbench Con one of our new products. So be there, be square. Okay, last one, I promise. 4-minute epoxy, also in tubes, resin and hardener. Also needs to be primed, also needs to be mixed. You're gonna squirt this out onto a little palette or something, mix it up with a popsicle stick or something, and then you can apply it. This cures quickly, right? 4 minutes. So this is a good one for doing quick sets, okay? So that is our epoxy line, and that sort of covers like the basic epoxy. So what we're going to do is I'll show you a couple examples of things that people made as we go through the live with the different epoxies so you can get an idea. But we're also, that was a question, what epoxy do I use for what? But we're going to now just jump right into the questions that you did leave, and then we'll use some examples of the artwork behind us to answer them, okay? So, thank you. If you're not coming to Workbench, I think they just closed the ticket sales.
Today's the last day.
Today's the last day. Oh, you could go and buy. They just had a live too. And we're going to be there, and we're planning big things. So you got to join. So welcome. Thanks for joining. We're doing the hint on the new product. The word total is in the name of the new product. There's your hint. You're welcome. Okay. Next. Okay, Megan, what questions do we have? And I know you guys have been leaving questions in the live too, and if you stick around, we'll get to those. But for now, we're going to start with the ones that you left with us overnight. So thank you very much. Megan, take it away.
First question comes from Cape Cottage. Which epoxy should I use for a 3-inch deep river pour?
Okay, so Cape Cottage has asked us, which epoxy should he use for his 3-inch deep river pour? The answer would be either Fathom or Thickset. And it depends, here she is over here. Get over here. It depends on how many pours you want to do. If you want to pour it once and be done, then what you need to do is seal it first, either with high performance or tabletop or something. And then you could pour it at once with Thickset Fathom. You can tint it and then pour it, but that's the one to use. A little bit of heat gun at once and you're done. So hope that answers your question. Fathom. And at the end here too, we do have a coupon for everybody that joined our live, and we'll do a giveaway as well. So there you go. So stay tuned. Keep you going. Okay, next question, please.
Next question comes from Space Drop Zero. How can I prevent yellowing with my epoxy?
Okay, Space Drop Zero is asking the question everyone wants to know. You just put all your wedding flowers in epoxy. What's going to happen? So Fathom, you would put your wedding flowers in Fathom. And this will stay clear for a long time. Over time, though, UVs and air, basically, and life will yellow epoxy. So ours are slow. You won't see it for several years, but I think it does yellow. Now, what we say to do to slow that down is to keep it away from the windows. Epoxy and the sun really don't get along. It's not a UV-friendly formula, basically. The UV stabilizers in Maker Epoxy make that a difference. Thank you. We sell a product called Halcyon, not this one, Halcyon Clear. And we recommend that you put Halcyon, which is a varnish, it's a water-based varnish, over epoxy if you're gonna put it in the sun. And that will protect it. If you're doing surfboards, like you've seen Lindsay and Eric doing their surfboards, they're putting varnish on top of their epoxy, okay? So epoxy just doesn't go straight into the sun. You do need to do those things in order to keep it from yellowing. Melanie Curley's in the house. Hi, Mel. Okay, welcome to our live. Thanks everybody for joining. We're still here. We've got a lot of people here still. This is great. Okay.
Can I show the Fathom piece behind you?
Oh yes, so now we talked about Fathom. We were talking about what you can make with the different epoxies. This is Fathom, pouring it thick, okay? This is in one of our TotalBoat molds. And what we did here was Katie, who works for us, made a bunch of these flowers out of epoxy and bent them into these little shapes, like flowers. This was actually inspired by Chihuly, what's his name? Chihuly? I can't say his name. Somebody on there knows. You know who I'm talking about, the Venetian glass awesome artist. So this is inspired by that, and you can pour really deep, and it's nice and clear. Some people are saying you can add little bits of tint to it. Ours comes with a little bit of a blue tint, and that keeps it looking nice and clear for a long time. So Fathom, this is a Fathom project, and you can go deep. And this is one pour after she seeded and glued all these down, right? Because if you didn't do that first, you got to do like a shallow one first. Dale Chihuly, yes, I just can't say it. Come down here, Mark. Tell us how to say it. So you have to set all this stuff first, otherwise it would float up, okay? So Fathom, and then thick set you could do it in different layers. Alrighty. Thanks, good question.
We have another question from Heather Finity. Can I use epoxy on my outside bar top?
Okay, Heather Fenity asking if we can use epoxy on her outside bar top. You can, you totally can. It makes it totally waterproof. It's a super duper excellent thing to use outdoors. That's why we build boats with it. That's why it's waterproof. It's good for the rain. It's good for the weather. I was telling you earlier, put it on the bottom of your wooden outdoor furniture that might sit in wet areas, but it has to be covered with a UV stable top coat. Again, that's going to be Halcyon Clear, or another kind of varnish if you don't mind a little tint. There's a whole bunch of varnishes out there. There are lots of different clear coats. You just want to make sure that you're using a UV resistant top coat on top of your epoxy, and you probably want it clear. So if you make a beautiful bar top for your outdoor kitchen or whatever, make an epoxy countertop. That's great, but make sure you put a clear varnish on top. Okay, we're getting actual pronunciations. Couple coats of clear epoxy, of clear varnish, okay? And you have to, by the way, the ugly truth about varnish, you have to maintain your varnish. Every year outside, the sun removes layers of that varnish and that protection. And when you see something fail in the sun, it's because you haven't kept up with the coats. The sun removes the coats, so that's why when you varnish something like your front door, none of you are invited to my house because we have varnish everywhere here in my front door. I've not varnished in like 4 years, and it looks like it. Every year, I've lost coats of varnish. Now I have to strip the whole thing and start over. When I do it again, I'll put on a coat or two every year and stay ahead of it. Same thing for epoxy, right? So you want to protect it, and then you want to keep up with it and continue to protect it, or then you're going to have an epoxy job on your hands when it gets down lower. Okay? If you're just joining, drop your comments in our chat here, and we'll get to them. But we're answering questions that we left in our story over the weekend. Epoxy resin question and answer. Let us know what you got. All right, next question, Megan.
From Total Share, what is the best way to avoid bubbles?
What is the best way to avoid bubbles? Okay, Everybody wants to know, there are several ways to avoid bubbles. Cold epoxy, bubbles, like almost certain, okay? Again, I'll say it again and again and again. Make sure your epoxy, make sure your shop, make sure your project is of a really good temperature, because if one of those is out of kilter, it's gonna throw things off. You want all of the things to go right, and that's going to give you the best chance for success, okay? So again, get the seed mat, warm up your epoxy, use a heat gun. Zyla in a tip says that she warms the resin and then she warms the hardener separately and then she pours them together. Don't overheat your epoxy with your heat gun, but you can get some bubbles out. And then of course, the slower setting epoxies release those bubbles over time, because it sets slower, it has time to rise up to the top. If the epoxy is curing, as the bubbles get to the top, they get trapped and they stay in there. So heat gun, you can use a spritz of 91% or higher rubbing alcohol. It has to be isopropyl rubbing alcohol of 91% or higher. The 76, the whatever, you can clean your wounds or whatever you do with that stuff. I don't even know what it's for, but it's not going to work in your bubbles. So use the higher percentage, the highest you can get. I think it's 91 and 96 isopropyl alcohol. And then also the heat gun or a little propane torch. Again, just don't overheat your epoxy.
And don't use a torch when you spray alcohol on it.
Oh, and don't use a torch and the alcohol spray. So, yeah.
All right.
Okay, another question.
We got one from Lighthouse Boston. Hi. Which epoxy cures the hardest and which is best for wood movement?
Okay, so which epoxy cures the hardest? Well, they all cure hard. So there is a thing for epoxy called tensile strength, and that's really actually, and this was a question from Lighthouse Boston, so thanks, Lucas. We're going to put you on the spot next week. This is where I was talking about structural epoxies before. You're not going to build a boat with Thickset or Fathom or Maker Epoxy. What you're going to do is, we have an epoxy that's actually called 5-to-1. It's a traditional epoxy. It's sort of where epoxies came from. Is 5 parts resin to 1 part hardener. And that's going to give you mad structural integrity, Lindsay, and everybody else. Okay, drink. No, that was last week. Okay. So structural integrity, yes, with the stronger epoxy. So that's going to be the high performance epoxy and the slow, medium, or hard, or fast hardener, or our traditional 5-to-1 epoxy. That's not one that I have spoken to a lot of our ambassadors about. It does something called blushing, which means as it cures, it has a wax on the surface and you have to clean that off. So that doesn't work for any of really as well for any of the knot filling or any of the rest of it. It will work for sealing and stuff, but you're going to have to get that blush off. So we like to say that the structural epoxy is really our high performance epoxy. And then, of course, Thixo is just amazing. And Thixo, I'll tell you why Thixo is amazing, actually. It's thickened. And it's thickened with something called silica or microfiber, which is really finely ground up fiberglass. So that makes it a lot stronger. So this, once you strengthen, we have thickeners you can mix into epoxy. And like Eric and Lindsay building the Jarvis boards, they're thickening epoxy in really key areas or using Thixo. And boat building is all about thickened epoxy. When you put 2 pieces together in a corner like this, you have to put a bead of epoxy down that joint and you rub a popsicle stick down there, and that's called a fillet. And the fillet is creating like an insane bond, and that has to do with the thickened epoxy and it adding structural integrity. Okay. That was for you, Linz. All right, what else we got?
We have another question. Do you have directions on the piece that you're holding from the live?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. I saw you ask this in the live, too. Who asked that question?
It was BPLUCIEN.
Yesterday, we made a little reel about the live, and I showed you a couple signs. We've been having a lot of fun using epoxy resin to make signs. If you are coming to Workbench Con, we're going to make a sign with Derek from Malden in a way that he does it with a CNC. But what we've done with this sign here this sign is a piece of wood cut on the laser here. This is 1/8 inch plywood, I think, yes. 1/8" plywood on the laser. This is also just a piece of plywood. And I'll tell you what we did. Coming around the front. Drinking water. Okay, here we go. What we did for this was we had two pieces, right? So this is blank and this is blank. The first thing I did was I coated this whole thing with a thin coat of high performance epoxy, okay? So that's gonna seal it. Plywood, like I said earlier, it's the worst offender. It's a bunch of sheets of wood together, and so there's a lot of air in there. There's a lot of cavities of air, there's a lot of voids. Seal your plywood every single time, okay? So we sealed the plywood first. I did this blue on the boat next, separately on another, not touching this. So this was sealed plain, and this was made blue. The next thing I did was I glued this to the plywood using the high performance epoxy. I just put a thin coat down again to get another seal coat on, and when that second seal coat went down, I put this on top, okay? And I let it bond, and I came back the next day and I flood coated it in tabletop. And I did that 2 or 3 times. I feel like I could even do a second or third or fourth coat. And it really just gives it like, it's really nice the way that it deals with the corners, and it deals with the way that the whole thing is, it's just glossy. It looks sick. It looks, the way that candy that's coated, and it's got this like really poppin' finish. It's great. So this is a really fun way to make signs. If you were at Maker Camp, we had made a big TotalBoat sign the same way. We cut out our logo, we glued it onto sealed plywood, and then we flooded it with the tabletop epoxy. I think the one at Maker Camp was made with Maker Epoxy so that it was good for outside. The sealer is called high performance epoxy. We're just sealing it with epoxy. One note about sealers and stains and waxes and stuff like that. People all the time on our tech support will call and say that they've put a first coat of something on, and then they're going to put epoxy in it or over it. And what you really want to do is you want to be really mindful. Epoxy, because it's a glue, okay? And we're using it for fun things like art, etc. This is not a mold. This is a cutout of wood, plywood, that we just put epoxy on and made blue that way. What was I saying? I get distracted by these comments in the thing. It's like so hard. What was I just saying? Who knows what I was just saying on there? This is terrible. Oh well. Okay. Yeah, I answered your question and then it threw me off. I can't remember. Anyway.
Come to Workbench Con if you want to see one made.
Yeah, we're gonna make it at Workbench Con. Yeah, seal it up and then put it on there. Yeah.
Using stains underneath.
Oh, stains. Yes. Okay. Yes, epoxy's a glue. Thank you. Okay. Yes, Erin, you got me. I love you. Okay.
Thank you.
What you don't want to do, you want to consider this, right? Okay. No, not your fault. Me. It's epoxy's glue. Okay. You want to just use all epoxy. It doesn't matter if you're using tabletop and then you're using high performance or vice versa, or penetrating and then whatever. Epoxy is about bonding. If you painted this whole thing,
with an oil-based stain.
Yeah, like with anything, and then you put epoxy on top of it, the paint is sticking to the wood, okay? And now the epoxy is sticking to the paint. So now you're relying on the bond of the paint to the wood, okay? What you really want to do is you want epoxy to be your bonder. So you want the first thing and every coat after really to be epoxy. And then that way you have the strongest bond, okay? There's things like mechanical bonds and chemical bonds. You really just want epoxy over epoxy, and that way you can be sure that it's not going to fail, because otherwise we're pinning your whole epoxy finish on top of a coat of paint or a coat of some sort of a stain or something. And we have tested a lot of compatibility with epoxies and different stains, but we certainly haven't tested them all, so we don't recommend that you stain. If you want to get some color on something before you add epoxy, you can do it with the epoxy, or you could put some color on top. So just be mindful of that, right? We're bonding with epoxy. Even when we're doing art stuff like this, you don't want the whole thing to slide off. Certainly, the stakes are higher when you're building a boat, right? You don't want to, you got to get every step right, or the stakes are higher, and we want you to have fun boating and not be frightened. So, okay. that's the process for this, okay? A couple pieces cut out on the laser, epoxy this first, seal coat it, glue this down on the second seal coat, flood coat it a couple times. Pretty simple. Can do this with everything. You could do it with your logo. You could do it with, you know, family pictures under here, whatever. All sorts of stuff. It's very cool. All right. What else we got, Megan?
We have one last question from Selena, actually, who is on our social team. What is an exothermic reaction and how do you avoid it?
Okay. What is an exothermic reaction? I explained this a little bit earlier, and I'll talk about it a little more. You need your epoxy to have an exothermic reaction in order to cure, okay? You need to make sure that you're mixing it right and you're stirring it all the way. And if you don't stir it all the way, it won't have that perfect reaction. The exothermic reaction is heat caused by the two chemicals joining together, and then that heat makes it turn into basically like a hard plastic. Okay, now if you have a runaway exothermic reaction, that's when you have too much heat and it's curing too quickly, and it can start to smoke and it can start to melt plastic, and you want to step away from that and put it outside. What we do with a runaway exothermic reaction, because it can happen just by walking away from a cup that you've left too much epoxy in. If you have a cup and you're pouring and you walk away from any of our epoxies, any epoxy, however, it won't work with the thick ones right away. If you walk away from, actually it won't work with the thick ones. It's just the
Penetrating epoxy happens quite a bit. Please don't leave that.
Yeah, penetrating, the tabletop, maker epoxy, high performance, the stuff that's not the long curing. If you leave it in a cup, it's going to start to cure in this cup, and because there's too much mass in here, and you're not meant to pour tabletop or high performance at this thick. This is basically what you're doing, is you're saying, well, I just did a pour that's this thick by this wide, and so it's definitely going to have a runaway exothermic reaction. So if you have epoxy left over, get it into a mold, pour it out even on a piece of plywood or something, and then you'll have better success, okay? It doesn't mean that you mixed it wrong. I see you, countryman, there. It means that you've got too much epoxy in there at one time. And so basically, as soon as you mix epoxy, this goes back to getting all your materials laid out first. As soon as you've mixed the epoxy, the clock is ticking and you want to get it out of this cup, okay? While I have this cup in my hand, it's a good time to show you that our cups will help you with mixing, okay? We certainly sell a fancy mixing metering pumps that'll do a lot of the work for you. Our big gallon kits here and our quart kits come with a pump. Like, I don't have a pump right in front of me. Megan's gonna grab one somewhere. I think they're buried. But it's one pump of each. So we're doing the math for you. The pumps are doing the work. Don't mess that up. Don't call us up and tell us that you did 2 pumps of one and 1 of the other because it's 2 to 1. No! All the time we get this. Read the directions. It's a really good idea to print out the technical data sheet for your product when you're using chemicals every single time if you're not comfortable. If you're not 100% sure, read it. It's got all the pitfalls. It's got all the things. It's got the answers to the questions that we know you're going to have a problem with. You can measure by weight. It's different. Check your TDS. It's not going to be exactly 2 to 1. It's like 100 to 48 for one of our 2 to 1 comments, okay? Back to these cups real quick. If you don't have pumps and you don't have a nice metering pump, what you can do is you can use these cups, and it's good for all our formulas. This is good for the 1 to 1 formula. This is the 2 to 1. This is the 3 to 1. And like I told you earlier, we have a 5 to 1, okay? And the way to use these cups is really easy. You basically are going to look at the cup and say, well, I need about this much epoxy. So you need about like half of the cup of epoxy. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, well, today I'm using a 2 to 1. Okay, so we're in the 2 to 1. Maybe I'm using high performance slow. It's my favorite one. So the 2 is the resin, and you can, you're always mixing more resin than hardener, okay? So the 2 is the resin, unless it's a 1 to 1, then they're the same. So the 2 column, I'm gonna go down. I said I wanted about a half a cup full of epoxy, so I'm looking around here, and this 4, that's about halfway up right there. See that? Okay? But the 4 here is all the way up. So now I'm going back down to this 3, okay? So the one in the second column you're looking at. You're basically going to match the two numbers. So my first one, I'm going to pour to the 3. So I'm filling my resin up to here. And then I'm going to have a line of resin here. Now I'm going to pour the hardener on top. I'm pouring it up to this next 3. So 3 is my number for this. That's the quantity of resin and hardener, okay? I'm going to end up with this amount of epoxy that way. This is in the 2-to-1. Don't use this. If you're mixing a 1-to-1, use this. And then you'll see 1-to-1, it's just, you got this much for the one there and this much for the one there. So this is twice as much as that. Doesn't look like it, but it's a little bit graduated and cylindrical, so that's the tip for that, okay? Cups, we have a lot of videos on that. That looks really ugly, but hopefully it's helpful. They're great cups. Okay. Bunch of questions inside the live. Did we answer anything? Cher says always put resin in the cup first, but I'll tell you that the resin is a lot harder, heavier and thicker, so you don't always have to put the resin in the cup first. You can put the resin on top, and you really just have to mix it really, really well. A lot of epoxy, you can tell when it's mixed because when you're looking at it from the top down and you're stirring, it starts out cloudy and then it turns to clear. So you're going to mix it until it turns clear, and then as Total Share says there, we love to tell you to take it out of this cup that you just mixed it in, because let's say you're mixing and you just never quite mix this little spot right here, like you just keep skipping that spot. Now you're going to pour this out on your project, and all this stuff here that you didn't mix up right in this area that we were talking about is unmixed epoxy on the top of your beautiful slab, your beautiful desk, your gorgeous boat, whatever it is. So what you do is you mix and measure in this 1 cup before you pour it out into your project. Mix it into a brand new cup. Mix it around another time in this cup and pour it out of a new cup. Now you have not measured and mixed in this cup. This is a clean cup. It's called the 2-cup mixing method, and it's a great way to avoid some problems with uncured epoxy in your project. All right.
We have a question in the audience from Rube Countryman. Can you add extra hardener in to make something set up quicker?
Can you add extra hardener to make it set up quicker? No, not really. No, I mean like maybe like a little, but no. If you're like, sometimes if you're looking and you're like, well, this was a little above the 2, I'm going to make this one a little above this 2. That's okay, but this is chemistry, right? Like we're telling you that if it's a 2-to-1 epoxy, it's not 100 to 50, it's 100 to 48. Those 2, what is it, ounces, grams, whatever it is, it matters. It really matters. Those 2, what, grams? Whatever.
Whatever
Those
you're measuring
2
in.
units.
Yeah.
It really measures. So it is specific. Be as specific as possible, okay? And
It's a chemical at the end of the day.
yeah, it is a chemical, and we're mixing 2 things together so that they have a reaction. So it is very specific. So you're better off to just pour it out and start over, especially if, again, if the stakes are high and you have things to lose, like a project. Hi to Marley Mills, who just joined.
And to Mike.
And to Mike. Oh, Mike's on too. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. This has been a good one. All right, we got some more questions we're going to answer. Drop your remaining questions. We've been doing this for almost an hour. I feel like you're probably ready to stop hearing me talking. We got Total B Mike on here. Hey, Mike. We're answering all
Exact amount of epoxy.
Is it better to do what? To air?
Under pour or over pour, basically.
Oh, under pour. Always just keep it on the lower side. You want to pour less. Again, too much can cause heat, and too much it can cure faster when there's too much, and so you're just better going slower, going thinner, using less. Okay, less is more sometimes. So baby steps definitely help as you're doing your epoxy projects, especially if you're new. And if you're new, there are so many videos on our YouTube page. There are so many videos that our ambassadors have made that we've shared on our Instagram and on our Facebook and TikTok. So resources everywhere. Our job on the social team is to try to figure out how to help you guys succeed with these projects. So please look at the stuff that we've made for you, because we've worked really hard to figure out what all your questions are, and like that. So, okay, another question.
We have a good question from the Bearded Prairie Chef. Any great ideas on how to get micro bubbles out without using a vac chamber for casting or for river tables?
Bubbles. So you can degas your epoxy first in a pressure pot, and what you want to do is you could put, if it was small enough, you could put something in there and cure it inside the pressure pot. So you still want to use it the way that you're using your epoxy. You're gonna let it cure inside of there. Sometimes if you're doing one of our thicker or our thick pour resins, the thick set or the Fathom, you can degas it first and then pour it in, and the pressure pot actually just takes the bubbles and just pressurizes them into absolutely basically microscopic invisible bubbles. So it's a good practice. If we do sell a pressure pot on TotalBoat.com, and that one is specific for epoxy resin, so you have to make sure that the pressure pot you're using will do that as well. Okay, I hope that answered that question. This guy really wants to be in our video, but you'll have to send us something that tells us what you want to do for another video.
Question again about yellowing epoxy and how to
working
avoid that.
time.
And working time.
I'm not sure what the working time old epoxy means, but yellowing epoxy, like I said, keep it out of the sun. It's all of our epoxy is basically, it's crystal clear when you pour it, with the exception being our fast hardener on the high performance. But all of these epoxies are basically starting out crystal clear, and to slow them over like the very slow gradual yellow that happens just over the lifetime of something. It's very slow, but a thin coat of a clear gloss or a clear varnish that has UV inhibitors in it, like Halcyon. Again, this is amber. We want you to use clear. That's going to help you out. Okay, so just do that. Okay. Other ways to get rid of bubbles. I see people talking about bubbles. We talked about the heat gun. We talked about isopropyl alcohol of 91% or higher. You can spritz that on there and it will disperse bubbles. And you can also use the heat gun, the torch, or little propane torches. Just be careful. Don't overheat your epoxy. You want to keep the heat gun moving. You want to keep your torch moving. You don't want to leave it there for any one time. We are adding heat to epoxy, which is already going through its own heat thing. So just be chill. Yes. Can you add different viscosity resin after the other one is cured? You can mix our epoxies. You can, like I was saying earlier, you can seal with high performance or tabletop, and then you can pour a thick set or or Fathom on top of that. So yes, you can go between the different epoxies. You can. If there's too much time between your epoxy pours, you might want to scuff it and then clean it really well. The enemy of all epoxy is dust, of any paint job, of anything like that, so just clean it and wipe it really well. Okay, and acetone is the solvent that you want to use when you're working with epoxy. Don't use mineral spirits, don't use denatured alcohol, use acetone. That's what is meant for epoxy use. You can clean your gloves if you have a little rag next to you. If you've got, always use your gloves. You need rubber gloves on. You never want to touch your epoxy project. Simple Creative Mind, hello, glad you joined us, one of our great ambassadors. So many of them on here. So just take care of your skin and make sure you're in an open space. But again, these are all low VOC, so just, you can do it. What else we have?
Does anyone have any other questions?
Any other questions to drop in here? Did we get to all our, that was a lot of questions in there.
Got a lot of good questions today. Oh, how do you seal photos before you put them in epoxy? That was another question.
How do you seal photos before you put them in epoxy? As with like your wedding flowers or your funeral arrangements or anything that is of, sentimental value, test on something else first. We don't know, what kind of a finish is on your photo or whatever, but epoxy you could just paint epoxy onto a photo and basically, again, bond or glue it to a piece of plywood and epoxy over it. But just test it on something that is not your most prized photo first. But it does work. So just make sure. Some photos, I don't know, Maybe CVS ran out of, you know, fixer that day or whatever. So I don't know. Does anybody even have photo prints anymore? Oh, food safe. People asked about that earlier. Yes. So cured epoxy, okay? Once it's cured, it's like a plastic, right? So you all have cutting boards that have plastic and stuff on it. Don't chop or cut on your epoxy, only because it's going to be it might chip. It's a hard plastic, so it could chip, and it could. That's our biggest concern. You can put food down onto cured epoxy. That's fine on we call them serving boards, because we want you to distinguish between cutting on there and serving on there. It's fine to put food on the cured epoxy. Obviously, uncured epoxy, you don't even want it in your kitchen. So unless you're working at your kitchen table making your epoxy, keep the epoxy out of your living area until it's cured, okay? You can mix it and do it in there, but you're not going to use it and demold it until you know it's cured. And you always want to wear gloves when you're demolding or doing something like that, so that you're sure that if there's a little, like sometimes I said, there's little bits that don't get mixed or something, a little sticky part, it's on your glove and not on your fingers. And then again, just wash your hands. Like one of those pumice things is really good for getting epoxy off. I know there's epoxy cleaners and stuff out there, but honestly, a little acetone, like a quick acetone, you don't use a lot of acetone on your skin, and some good pumice soap or something is a really good. Duresta made a good soap at one point, I think he does. Hey, Ed. Hey, Rube. Okay, don't cut on the epoxy. Yes, exactly. It just ruins the beautiful board you made too. So, but it is food safe once it's cured. It's a plastic, so yes, you can use it.
Are the varnishes safe for food contact?
The varnishes are for use outside, and Halcyon you can put your food on if you're putting it on a cutting board or something. But we have a food safe finish called Wood Honey. So if you want food safe, that's called Wood Honey, and that's more of a wax and oil finish that you would keep applying. This is perfect for like cutting boards and stuff, but it's not a hard finish, okay? Isn't he cute? Don't put it on your toast, okay? Don't. Okay. He's so cute. All right. Any other questions? A few mica powders. Yeah. The other thing about food safe is we can talk to you all day long about TotalBoat epoxy. I don't know what pigment you're using. We don't know what you're using. Are you using paint? We don't know. So we can only speak to ours. And once you add pigment in there, it's not clear epoxy anymore. So the Zephyrs that are on here, Nat and James, Sailing Zephyr, they have a great YouTube channel. Go follow them. They did this wave technique on the counters of their boat. And we have a video that we're about to release that explains something really cool about epoxy. Nat and James came here to make their countertops, and they had never done it before. And we were like, don't worry, because we'll do it now. And if you hate it, we'll just do it again. It's so easy. You just scuff it up a little bit, you wipe it down really clean, and you try it again. And with a lot of these waves, this is Grace Bell Arts. She does it perfect every time, apparently. I don't even know what to say. Then you could just keep adding waves. I have a couple boards at home that I did this like 3 or 4 times just until I got it right, until I liked it. The same is true for their countertops on their boat. If they hadn't liked them, we could have kept going until they got it right. But we nailed it in the first try, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Nat was explaining that, these are countertops in their boat. They're living and preparing food around the galley of this boat. And what they can do when they start to get a little beat up is just clear coat it again. And now they're going to have a beautiful, clear, glossy coat on top. And that's a great way to put new life into an old project that you did. So you can always do that. So there you go. If you want to order from us and you live in Canada, somebody's asking about that, call us up. You can't do it on our website, but we do ship to Canada. We have Wood Designs by Lori on here. She is also a total master of the wave technique, and she is Canadian. Lori, go follow Wood Design by Lori. She's amazing. She's been an ambassador of ours for a long time, and this woman can make some stuff with epoxy. You won't even believe it. So that's great. How about when you run aground? Well, when you run aground, oh, Mike. Okay. Fixo when you run aground. I don't know. You better get your boat up out of the water for a couple hours. Get out the Fixo and the high performance epoxy, get your fiberglass out, and maybe pop a beer, because it sounds like it's going to be a while. Hopefully you don't have any damage from running aground. We'll ship to the whole parts of Canada. We will not ship to Nigeria quite yet. Maybe soon. Any other questions on there, you guys? Thixo for the Fixo. Yeah, Thixo everything. Hashtag Thixo everything. Have you used Thixo? If you have, let us know. And if you have a video of you using Thixo, send it to us because we're working on a little Thixo everything video. Because honestly, this stuff, this is gold. Like if you run aground, you could fix it. If you had a hole in something, this is what you're going to use to fix it. You can bond dissimilar materials with Thixo. You can fill gaps with Thixo. You can fill knots with Thixo. The thing about it, like I mentioned earlier, is it's thickened, so it's not transparent, okay? So it's got a little bit of white tint to it, and that's because it's thickened with silica or microfibers or little fiberglass stuffs. I don't even know. Okay. We've been doing this for an hour now. You cannot eat Thixo. But Mike, you can drink wood honey. Only Mike can drink the wood honey. Nobody else. If your name is Mike, I don't want to hear it. Mike Mills only.
What about Lowe's?
Lowe's! You can buy TotalBoat in Lowe's! Right now, it's a lot of our marine products. It's a bunch of stuff that you might find you need for your boat. But we have Lowes.com is selling TotalBoat right now. You can get your bottom paint. You can get some of our Halcyon. You can get a bunch of stuff, wood finish products. Check the questions, I guess they're saying. And also we have a bunch of different stores that are going to start carrying the different Lowe's stores. So we'll let you know. And check your area and definitely go into your Lowe's and say, are you guys carrying TotalBoat yet? I heard you're carrying TotalBoat. Where's the TotalBoat? Bang the door down. Let them know that you want to do it. All right, while we're sitting here, we do have a coupon to mention to you guys. You guys have been amazing today. That is us in Lowe's. It's so exciting. Thanks a lot. We're also in Woodcraft. So you can go to Woodcraft and get your epoxy. You can go to Lowe's and get your bottom paint and a bunch of your marine supplies. And you can get Halcyon at both of them. So go in there. Tell those stores how you love that they're carrying TotalBoat. And thank you very much for doing so. Okay. We're trying to get to all the questions here. It's kind of fast and furious. So everybody's used a lot of it. This guy really wants to be in the video. What else do we have here?
What was your question, J Innovations? I don't know if I see it.
Did we miss your questions? There's a lot of them, so maybe just pop it down in the comments here because we're gonna finish this up. I'm gonna give you a coupon code, okay? If you've been in the live and you've been following today, it's TB Live 10. TB like TotalBoat Live 10. Okay, I bought TotalBoat from Amazon and it was yellow. It shouldn't be yellow. Call Amazon back. Let them know you got some TotalBoat that wasn't right because we want it to be right. Okay, and we have a guarantee that it will be right. So let them know. But if you bought it from Amazon, call them first and they'll take care of it on the back end with us. But that's how you get that started. All right. If you bought it from TotalBoat.com, call us up. Okay. What else do we have?
Do you want to give away a kit?
Okay.
Of epoxy?
Yeah. We will give away an epoxy kit. We're going to give away a quart kit of the 2-to-1 high performance epoxy, which is the one that I said was my very favorite. It's the one that you can build a surfboard with, you can build your boat, you can do your waves, you can do all the things. And we will give that away. So make sure that you dropped a comment into our live here and then you will be eligible to win, okay? Do you recommend a special product for stabilizing wood? Yeah. Penetrating epoxy for stabilizing wood, definitely. Mm-hmm. It's going to seep in the deepest, okay? Hello, Katrina. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for joining. We're doing lives every Friday, okay? So let us also know in the comment, what do you want us to talk about in our lives? I think next week we're going to join Lucas from Lighthouse Boston in his shop. He is an expert furniture builder and table builder in Boston. And it's going to be amazing. So think of your questions that you have for Lucas. He's really a pro, and it's exciting to see that he wants to do that. All right, so TB Live 10 was our coupon. Thanks. We have a winner. I also want to let you guys know that we have a lot of different ways to get this information that I've just spurted out in an hour, okay? We have TotalBoat.com. TotalBoat.com has an excellent help section. We have articles written that we have based on your questions, on the top questions that we get from you. So check out our website and start all of your questions off by reading the tech data sheet. It has all of these answers in there, really. And if you're just working with one specific product, that's a great way to do it. You just go right to that product page, and on that page every time is that TDS. It's called Technical Data Sheet. Now, a lot of our products have this cute little QR code right there. That's so that you can just take that picture. That'll take you right to this product page. And then right on there, there are examples, there's reviews, there's people's opinions. That's sometimes a dangerous thing. Usually, though, the feedback is good because we read them all. So check that out on TotalBoat.com. We also have a call center. We have our social team. We have, we're really trying to work hard to make sure that this is as clear for you as possible and that we've anticipated all your problems. So that's what we do here at TotalBoat. Thank you guys for joining in today. What a nice Friday this has been. It's already 4:06. It went so fast. We have a winner, and this winner, like I said, you're going to get a quart kit of the high performance epoxy. We'll throw in some other fun stuff. We always want you to have an apron or a hat or something, so that'll be good. Be sure you tune in to our lives on Friday. Tell your friends, all that stuff. Thanks a lot. Thanks for all the compliments. It's really fun to work with you guys, and I think the coolest part about what we do at TotalBoat is that you guys are making the coolest stuff with our product, and social media is the way that we're able to see what you're doing. So tag us when you're doing something really cool. Reach out and let us help you when you have a problem, and then share your successes. Let us know what you've done that's really cool. Try something different. Let us know how to help you. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, winner, stick around. Hold on one second. Alorn by Alora, you are our winner. You guys were all so great today with all your questions. Congratulations. I'm going to say that her name is Alora, do we think? Or his, him or her. Your name is Alora. Congratulations. We do a giveaway at every live. That means every Friday you have a chance to win something. And we have our coupon, so go use that coupon. Also, if you know one of our great ambassadors like Woodbrain, who was on here, she's got a discount code, or she's got a special link to use. I think it's totalboat.com/woodbrain, and you can go use that, and that'll help Lindsay out a little bit, and you get a discount too. So that's a great way to support our ambassadors who are out there trying this with super cool projects, stuff that we don't have the time to do. But we're going to build a Jarvis board in our lab here that we're going to be able to use and share with our company. So we're going to have Lindsay come help us do that, and Eric too. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Don't forget to send us some ideas for the next live or any other live that you want to see us do. Who's going to Workbench Con? Are we going to see you there? We are going to be there, okay? Simply Creative Mind has a code too. I bet a bunch of you guys, we've got a lot of great ambassadors on here with different codes. So find your friends that work with TotalBoat, and they will have a discount code for you, and that helps us help them, okay? Thanks, guys. This was great. Love it. Send us your questions. Tell your friends. Share the news. Like, comment, subscribe, all the things. Thanks. We love it. Happy Friday. Have a good weekend. TotalBoat. Woo! Now, this is when Lindsay's like, Lindsay, I'm all nervous. How do I end the live? Let's see if we can do it right now. I kind of don't want to go, though. You guys want to hang out? Let's hang out. How can you participate? Send us a message if you want to do a live for us. We want you to be working on something cool. I'm sorry we're not letting you join our live. We're just having too much fun alone. It would really complicate it if we did. Can you imagine? Anyway, thank you. Thanks, Simple Creative Mind. Thank you. Great ambassadors. You guys are the best. Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining.